I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is our nerdiest thing.
This season, we are discussing A Court of Thorns and Roses and all of Sarah J. Maas's books. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Our Nerdiest Thing. Today, we are talking about A Court of Thorns and Roses, chapters 30 and 31. But before we get into it, we're going to do our nerdiest recap.
Dear God, please don't let it be me. And Mindy's looking at me like it's going to be me.
Did you already do it?
Yeah.
It is me. Okay.
Oh, wait,
Fuck.
let me get the 30 seconds.
I'm like, what happened in the second chapter?
I love how it says we have a winner.
Yay, Deb.
Yay. All right, I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, go. Okay, so there's a ball thrown in Feyre's honor, and she realizes the next morning that Claire's whole family has died, and she wants to go back to the Spring Court. She tells Nesta to not follow her. Nesta tells her it's fine, and all of a sudden Elaine and Feyre's father remember everything. Then she goes back. The estate is in shambles, and Alice is there hoarding food, it seems, and she tells Feyre all about the curse and how it needs to be broken, and then tells her she's a dumbass for going and trying to save him.
Nice.
Very nice.
It's just because
Golf
I wrote
claps.
notes 5 minutes ago.
I'm about to say, when you started talking about a ball, I did not realize or remember what kind of ball it was. I was like, wait, what?
They had a ball?
Yeah. I thought you were going to say.
balls.
I thought you were going to say they threw a ball in her face. And I was trying to remember, like,
You're
what?
like, who did that?
And by the time you finished the sentence, I was like, oh, yeah.
That makes me feel better because I'm like, well, and it's so at this point so inconsequential that there was a ball. Like you're
Right.
kind of like past that point
Right.
already.
I mean, she
Like,
was
it doesn't
totally
matter.
meh about it anyways.
Yeah, she did not care.
She was like, whatever.
So now, Mindy, will you do our nerdiest vocabulary?
I would love to. So this week, I've got a few things I'd like to talk about vocabulary-wise. For starters, this is a little short one. They talk about, when Alice is explaining things to Feyre, she talks a little bit about the cauldron, and they talk about the eddies of the cauldron, and I wanted to figure out exactly what that looked like, because in my mind, I'm thinking a cauldron, and it's like bubbling. Like, I think Shakespearean witches.
What does it look like to you?
So in my mind, it's like a golden cauldron. Gold. I don't know why I don't pick gold. I don't know. And then in my mind, it's like bubbling, like it's hot, like it's like a hot spring in there, but it's not. It's actually a whirlpool, because an eddy is a whirlpool.
Because I've always thought of it as being like kind of this portal, and maybe that's why, because it's described as a whirlpool, almost like a portal of water on the ground. That's how I've always pictured it. Because if I think of it as like a big black cauldron, it sounds super fucking cheesy.
I mean,
See,
it
I think of it like a big black
does,
cauldron.
but I think of it as a gold cauldron. I don't know why I think it needs to be fancier than
Than a black one, right? Yeah, that's why I'm like, they have all this high power. They just got a black kettle off the fire, and they're like,
Right.
this'll do.
But yeah, I was like, why don't I know what an eddy is? I did not know, so I learned something.
How do you spell that?
It's EDDY.
Okay.
And it's whirlpool.
And it's basically like a circular motion of water, which is like a whirlpool, which, I mean, makes so much more sense, especially when you brought up portal. Like, that makes
Right.
tons of sense. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. And then another little tidbit when she's talking to Alice. I don't know if y'all remember when I was talking about Amanrantha, and the name means like never fading flower or whatever. And she actually says that in this chapter.
Yeah.
She
I
does.
I was
wrote
like,
that
I saw
down.
I
that.
know that. So I was really excited to see that come up again. And one more thing I discovered looking up names on Urban Dictionary. I thought it was funny the last time I did it. So I thought I would try another one, and I looked up Tamlin, and in the Urban Dictionary it says a failure.
Poor Tam Tam.
Yikes.
And the underneath it says, stop calling him a tool. It implies he has use.
Oh, that's not
I know. It's
Well, in fairness,
He does
too,
bring
that
Rhysand back to life.
I was gonna say he does have a use, right? Like he brings Feyre to Prythian, where she ultimately belongs, just not with Tamlin, right?
That's true.
Oh,
But yeah, I thought that was a little sad because of all the Tamlin hate. I mean, he gets a lot of hate.
Yeah, a lot of it is deserved.
I was about to
I
say,
know.
it's like whenever someone gets fired, you fired yourself. Right?
It's the consequences to my own actions.
Right. Oh, no, I was a horrible person. Now I have to deal with it.
Well, let's get into it then. I know I have a lot of things to say about Nesta from chapter 30.
Surprising.
I know, right?
We never talk about her.
Can
I'm
you
so
believe?
glad.
But I did want to just remind a little bit of context where we are. At the end of chapter 29, Nesta and Feyre have just had this whole conversation about what Feyre has really gone through and everything that happened because Nesta knew that she didn't, go to a rich aunt's house. And Nesta has just pointed out that Feyre would do anything for Tamlin, unlike their father, who did not do everything he could for their mom or for them, and unlike Thomas Mandray, who would not do anything really for Nesta. And I just thought it's interesting that she just pointed out, you, Feyre, would do anything for Tamlin, not Tamlin would do anything for Feyre.
Yeah, that's a good point.
true.
Because later on, he doesn't, right?
Right.
Like, he doesn't, there's a lot of stuff that he could do and he doesn't.
I will say, because I noted on there, he actually kind of screws Prythian over.
Mm-hmm.
Like he sacrifices everybody else because in the name of his quote unquote love
Keeping her
for
safe.
Feyre and keeping her safe.
Yeah.
So like that's literally the only thing he does for her, but he screws
But I don't
everybody else in the process.
I don't really feel like, though, that's why he does it. I always felt like some complacency there of like, well, he's still just going to continue to do nothing. Essentially, because his only option was to go to Amanrantha at that point, which is really doing nothing.
Well, I think in his mind he thought he was sacrificing
Well, I know,
himself
right?
or whatever.
And he did think that, but what I'm saying is he was going to have to do that if she was there or not. So I
Right,
don't really feel
true.
like he did it for her.
Well, and Alice will give us a little bit more context to Tamlin's line of thinking in the next chapter. But yeah, I mean, he does protect Feyre at the risk, or the not risk, but detriment to everybody else, including himself.
Well, and I want to go back to what you said about one of you just said she would do anything for him, but he wouldn't do everything for her. The thing with Nesta, though, since we're going to be talking about her, that I think it is important to remember is that Nesta doesn't love very many people, but the people she does love, she loves unconditionally, which is why she has such a problem with her father. She talks a lot in this chapter about how he should have gone places to try to find a cure for his mother. He should have done more once, his legs were broken. He could have done all these things, which is honestly quite true. And there are a lot of parallels between he and Tamlin, and ultimately why Nesta really doesn't like Tamlin at all, and why we end up not too. It is this very much like, well, it's the cards I was dealt. I guess that's what we're going to have to do. Oh no. It's
I love that parallel. I had never thought of it that way, but now
I mean, they say you date your father, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I do not.
Feyre definitely has some daddy issues.
A little bit.
Well, and let's remember too, in Silver Flames, Nesta goes with Cassian to the Spring Court to meet with Eris, and Tamlin kind of crashes the meeting, and Nesta basically tells him off and is like, you suck and we all hate you and you never deserve Feyre, and I'm glad she broke your heart.
Yeah.
F you, know?
Well, because she loves unconditionally, and
Yes.
she doesn't understand how he could do the things that he did if he actually
Yeah,
Things
if
that
he
he
actually
didn't
really
do.
cared for
Yeah.
her.
right.
So Feyre basically finds out at the beginning of this chapter, in chapter 30, what happened to Claire Better's family. And she hears her sister Elaine and her dad talking about the Better family land, and her dad is talking about it in terms of wanting to purchase the house, or the ruins, I guess, and purchase the land, which I thought was really interesting, because when Feyre comes back from Prythian and they think she's come back from the elderly aunt's house or whatever, the first thing that her dad does is count all
her
the money.
money.
Yes. And so now this horrible tragedy has happened that has, way bigger implications that Feyre knows about, but the family doesn't, and he's still just focused on the money,
It's
the
almost
financials.
like a vulture. He's
Yes.
just going for it.
It's a really negative, I think, a very negative character trait. It comes across very greedy and vulture-y.
Well, and on top of that, when she leaves at the end of this chapter, he's nowhere to be found. It's
Yeah.
okay, well, I guess I'm not useful anymore now that I'm not going to stay here with my money.
Yeah, she says I didn't even try to look for my dad.
Right.
I didn't bother to try to say
why
goodbye
wasn't
to him.
he fucking running down the stairs telling her he loved her and stuff? Thanks for
Right.
being back for a week.
Yeah.
That's I don't understand what was going on in his mind there, unless maybe he was overwhelmed by like all the memories rushing back, because the glamour broke on him and Elaine when Feyre and Nesta start to have this conversation.
I had totally forgotten about.
Yeah, I forgot that too. So when Feyre hears about what happened with Claire Better, she realizes in the previous chapter, she hears people talking about, this horrible fire or something that had happened, but she doesn't realize who it had happened to. And so now she's putting all the pieces together and realizes that it's Claire Better, which of course for Feyre is absolutely like horrific to hear that that's happened, because Rhysand asked her name while she was still in Spring Court, and she gave the fake, not the fake name, because it wasn't like a made up name, but it's not her name. She told him that she was Claire Better. And when we talked about that chapter, we talked about the fact that, Feyre didn't know what he was going to do with that information, and Rhysand did not know that Claire was an actual person. He thought it was a made up name. So when he gave that information to Amarantha, he did not know that he was putting an actual person in danger. He thought it was a completely made up name of somebody that doesn't exist. So, when we get in the next section, we'll learn more about Claire, but Feyre knows like something horrible has happened, and that it's essentially, she feels like it's her fault. And we talked last time too about how Rhysand struggles with that as well, because he feels like it's his fault, that this happened to Claire, because ultimately he's the one that gave Amarantha that information. But hearing that coming right off the heels of this, you would do anything for your High Lord, and her feeling guilty, like, well, yeah, I would do anything, but I'm not currently doing everything that I could. Feyre is immediately like, I'm out. And she's like, I'm gonna go, Nesta, here's the information you need to know. Iron doesn't do anything. Like, I'm going to leave. You guys are on your own.
They also can't lie, and Ashwood is the only thing I found. I found it really interesting at that point that she was like, look, just forget everything else you've learned. Like, the can't lie is what has stuck with her the most, I feel like, because, it's the biggest deception that was created in this whole treaty, right? And we find out later from Alice that humans can kill as many fairies as they want.
Right.
It was just something that was propagated so that they wouldn't, right? They wouldn't rise up against the Fae. So I think that loyalty to Nesta is so important, and maybe that's why Feyre said that. Like, look, they can be dishonest to you. Don't believe anything that they say. But I'm not sure Nesta would anyway, to be honest.
Right.
She's extremely like distrustful, but with good reason, right? And so Feyre says, I'm going to go. I've got to save them. I've got to help. And Nesta says, like, go. Dad told you not to come back before. Like, I'm telling you again, like, do not come back. We will be fine.
Another motivation she has is she kind of, as she goes through, like, I gave Claire Better's name, then this happened and they burnt her. She kind of finally lands on that, oh shit, they've crossed the wall now. Like, she's always been worried about them coming on the other side. And that's sort of what gives her the impetus
to tell them. And they came and no one knew.
Exactly.
That's what
and left no
so
trace.
Nobody suspects.
Yeah. And so that's sort of what like drives her, I think, to finally be like, oh shit, I'm just going to just tell him everything.
Yeah.
One thing that Nesta said right before the scene changes to Feyre being with Elaine is she said, I think I'd like to see what else is out there, what a woman might do with a fortune and a good name. And I wrote, unfortunately for Nesta, Spiral, because we know Nesta does have a good name and fortune and a safe place to live, but she has gone through so much that she just spirals. She doesn't use what she always wanted to use to her benefit because she mentally cannot.
See, I wrote down that exact same quote, but with a completely different like thinking.
Let's hear it.
Because she has this hope in book 1 of being able to travel, having their fortune back, and having a good name, the Archeron name, because we learned early on in the book that their family it was like generational wealth, right? Which they learned later was generational debt. But they would be presumably like a well-known family. But I was thinking of it in terms of like, first of all, she doesn't have a fortune. She uses Rhysand's money and Feyre's money, the Night Court money, right?
That's
so technically it's not hers, because that's a really big issue in Silver Flames, right? Is that
she spends money that's
the
not
straw
hers.
that breaks the camel's back is that they get this like ridiculous bill that Rhysand like reads out loud, and it makes Feyre cry at breakfast, right? And she also doesn't have a good name, because everybody knows that she is Feyre's sister. Everybody knows that she is the High Lady's sister-in-law to the High Lord. Like, everybody knows that, but everybody thinks that she's a bitch. The inner circle thinks she's horrible. They all think that she's leeching off of Feyre. They think that she's lazy. They think that she's hateful. You know what I mean?
In that moment, she is.
Well, right. But she has a really bad reputation.
That's true. It's so funny the way that we perceive those things, though, because I guess my line of thinking when I read that was she could have used that opportunity
100%.
to have a good name and to, and
she
kind
could
of do
have.
what Feyre said to Rhys-Anne, like, well, what's my place here? What am I supposed to do?
And she tried in the third book, I think, in Wings and Ruin, where she was like the emissary and she was helping and she was doing the scrying with the...
She's about as good as emissary as Lucian is.
No, right? She was trying, but in her mind, like, all that ended up happening was her father got murdered in front of her and she couldn't do anything to help him.
Right.
What's interesting is I also wrote that quote down, but I also wrote that Feyre thinks after that, no limits. There were no limits to what Nesta might do, what she might make of herself once she found a place to call her own. I prayed I would be lucky enough to see it. And it made me sad.
Foreshadowing.
But it made me a little sad because she doesn't really ever get there. Kind of like what you were saying. Like, yet, and there's more hopefully to come.
I disagree. By the end of that's so funny, but I disagree with both of you.
So by the end of Silver Flames, she's getting there, but
yes,
she hasn't reached her full potential yet.
Well, no, she hasn't reached her full potential, but she has. By the end of Silver Flames, I would say that she has found like a place to call her own because she's got like she's a Valkyrie. She's an Illyrian warrior.
Do you feel like she feels like all of that is hers at that point, though? I feel like she's still struggling with that.
I think that she's still struggling with her place in the inner circle. Now that she's with Cassian, she's still Feyre's sister, right? Like she's always going to be the sister to the High Lady and sister-in-law to the High Lord. But I think that having the House of Wind that they've given to her because like she made it, right? Like she imbued some magic into it or whatever. And it truly like belongs to her essentially. She has that space to call her own and she's got like she and Gwen and Emery are the Valkyries, right? And she started that whole thing with all the priestesses. Like that is her baby. That is her project. And I think that that is the beginning of what Feyre is hoping to see, you know?
Right.
And yeah, I agree with that. But I think going back to what she wanted, like I think I'd like to see what else is out there, what a woman might do. What's interesting is I don't think that's ever realized. I think she realizes that that's not really what she wanted and that she's now finding her place in a different way.
Yeah.
But you also, when you're extremely depressed and groomed, essentially, you have a different idea of what you want compared to what you want when you're not. So I think there's still going to be a lot of change for her because she's not done healing yet.
No,
she's nowhere near done. And you never are, but I mean, she's not even to like a good place yet.
Yeah. Well, and in this moment too, let's remember the context of Nesta's mental health in this moment in Akatar, where she's saying like, I want to go other places. I want to go travel somewhere else. She's coming off.
I want to go where the people are.
No, she wants to go far away from the people. She has just spent weeks and weeks and weeks thinking and fighting the idea that she is crazy because she wasn't glamored and her dad and sister were, and they have no idea what actually happened. And remember, she has to keep that piece of the table that Tamlin like clawed in her pocket to remind her like, no, I'm right, they're wrong. So she's struggling with literal like what is reality. And she also was attacked by Thomas Mandray. He tried to assault her, and at this point, nobody knows that.
Right.
Nobody knows that happened. So she is dealing with that trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, right? And nobody knows. Her dad and sister don't know all those things that she's struggling with. And so I think part of this, like, I want to see what else is out there is like, this is hell. This place is hell.
Well, it is hell for her.
Right. Like, get me out of here, right? And so I think keeping all that in mind, when she tells Feyre, like, we're good, you go and don't come back. And Feyre says, like, I realize that she's giving me a gift. Like, I don't think Feyre could possibly fathom, like, how much of a gift that really was.
Right.
Because Feyre coming back is the only person who knows the truth with Nesta. Right. Like that was like confirmation that she was not crazy, that she was right about the whole thing, and that everybody else is crazy, right? Because they've been glamored, and she's sending that like lifeline for herself away completely. And that's a huge sacrifice for Nesta to make. I think.
Yeah.
The
which
only
is person that she can commiserate with in the entire world.
And she's like willingly sending her away because she recognizes in the previous chapter, she basically is like, this is not your home anymore. Like Prythian is where you want to be. That seems to be where you belong. Like she sees that Feyre has completely changed into a different person, and she's like wanting Feyre to go be that other person.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Which is why Nesta is the best.
In summation,
yes, Nesta is the best in the end. But yeah, I felt like that whole scene was a redo of the very beginning of the book, right? Like just like a better version of
I'd agree with that.
When she left with Tamlin the first time. A little bit more meaningful, I guess, and everybody is a little more aware of what's really going on this time when she leaves again. And I think that I think Feyre and Nesta are very much like, we're probably never going to see each other again. Like, if you're going to go try to help, you're a human. What are you going to do? You're probably going to die, you know?
Right. Can we just talk about how adorable it is that Feyre thinks she's going to go there and fix everything?
You know, but she does.
I know, but like at the time, like you think about that, like, I don't know. I mean, it's good that she thinks that way.
I mean, 99.99999% of the rest of the human population would have never gone back.
True.
No, yeah. And the last thing I wanted to say about this chapter, I just, again, one of those things that I'm like, never noticed before how much of a red flag this is until this time that I read it. But she's like going to the Spring Court Manor and getting closer and starts to think like, man, Tamlin is going to be so pissed. And she starts thinking through like, what am I going to say so that he doesn't just start roaring and like completely freaking out and, you know, clawing at everything. Like he's going to be so mad. And I'm just like, that is a problem. Like, you're coming back to the man you love and that supposedly loves you, and you're not thinking
and
like,
you're tentative about it.
Yeah, like he's not going to be happy to see me. He's going to be super pissed, and I'm going to like, what's the best strategy to calm him down? Like, oh, girl,
Before we go to the next chapter, you know, it talks about how she goes into the forest and she spends 2 days and nights trying to find the break in the wall, essentially, right? And we've talked a lot about how these books intertwine and how we haven't seen Throne of Glass intertwine yet with these, but we all have heard me talk about a theory I have several times. But did you notice how she says, it was 2 days before I spied the mossy stones placed across from each other, a faint whorl carved into both of them, a gate. And so I wrote Wordstone.
Yeah.
Because it is technically a portal to a different space. Mm-hmm. So I feel like here it's described as a marker, but I feel like it's more of a
or it could just be like a word mark in general, like
that maybe creates the portal, maybe the two
like
across
cuts
from
it
each
across
other.
or whatever.
So because you know in these books, word marks have not currently been talked about, but there's references to them all the time.
Yeah. We talked to from the very beginning, the markings on their house before Tamlin shows up, that those might be word marks. I always thought weird marks. Is that not right?
I always Mindy, marks. Can you look that up for our nerdy vocabulary? I said word marks.
No, I know you did, but I always thought...
No, I know. Like, that's what I'm thinking, though, because like they are essentially symbols for language.
Yeah.
That's sort of where I went.
And
that
weird.
Makes a lot more sense.
You know what? You're good at a lot of shit, Whitney. I'm just, you can
pronouncing things correctly is not one of them. I can remember every detail about it, but I'm going to say it wrong.
That's okay. That's okay. And you know what? These are all made up words anyway. So
exactly.
I think we have to remember that sometimes.
That's true. Feyre goes into the Spring Manor, realizes like everybody's gone. Like there is nobody here. It is totally trashed. She's trying to use her like hunter tracker skills to try to figure out what happened, and assumes like, like a big group of people came, and it looks like Tamlin and Lucien went willingly with them, like not necessarily a huge fight or anything, but there's a lot of damage.
Did you notice that she didn't know if the damage was from a fight in the dining room
Yes.
or
Or
from
from
Tamlin
him when he
throwing
got
a
mad.
hissy fit?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God.
That was another one of those like red flags.
yeah.
Red flag.
Oh, gee, I hope this was from him losing his shit and not from him being taken.
Right. Like that.
Can you imagine, like, they're just sitting there at that table waiting for the inevitable? Like, she kind of alludes to that's what she thinks maybe happened. Like, that is incredibly sad.
Yeah.
That they're just sitting there waiting to be taken.
I would love like a bonus chapter from Lucien.
Yeah.
Or
I hope they
Tamlin's
got
POV.
rip roaring drunk. That's what I would have
right?
done.
Like,
Yeah.
Like they know, exactly when the clock is going to hit that like 49th year or 50th year or whatever. And they know when it's going to happen, and they
Yeah.
know something is going to take them to Under the Mountain, whether it's like a magic that makes them winnow or something like that. Yeah, I would love a POV
Yeah.
for one of them about
That would be cool.
the moments leading up to that, But and then we find out later too that in book 2, Rhysand came with the big group of people that came to like pick up Lucien and Tamlin, and he tells Feyre, "I came to make sure that you were gone and that you were safe."
Yeah.
Which I may have said this before, but I still would be curious. Like, if she had still been there, what would he? What
True.
would he have done?
Yeah, what would he have done?
To figure out how to keep her safe, try to get her out and not under the mountain without showing his hand.
Well, and at that
You
point,
know?
he doesn't know she's his mate. So
No, but he suspects it.
right.
Yeah.
But I think that he probably wouldn't have been as drastic as he would have
No,
been
yeah,
later.
later,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? Because I think later he would have just been like, well, I'm minnowing her ass out, and I guess we'll just deal with the consequences later.
So she runs into Alice, or I guess Alice runs into her, and Feyre says, "What's going on?" And Alice is like, "All right, bitch, I'll tell you what's going on." Just kidding. That was
How dare you not tell him you love him?
That was a paraphrase. I loved Alice's like passion, and I loved her. Like, she was just so mad.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for
Like,
Feyre.
irritated.
Yes.
Like, she was like, it wasn't just so much that she was angry or mad, but she was like frustrated and irritated. And like, I
Well,
could just feel that in
just
her
like
voice.
Lucien when Tamlin was sending Feyre away, right? It's that same like, we are right there.
Yeah.
We're so freaking close.
Yeah.
She was gonna say it. Like, just
If
let her
he-
say.
And here's the thing: if he had given her 3 days, she probably would have.
Oh,
I know.
1,000%. I think she would have.
Yeah.
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 But he made that choice for her, which is a
Well,
theme
and
that we'll see continue.
If we
right?
go into fates too, though, it was probably what was fated to
Well,
happen.
yes. Yeah,
Because
that's true.
The
Well-
people under the mountain had to be freed, right? Someone had to be the curse breaker, and she had to be with Rhysand more. I mean,
Right.
it probably was in quote unquote in the
Well,
stars.
and let's not forget that Rhysand basically, like, if Rhysand hadn't come in and like made it look like get her out of here, like that was his whole purpose.
Yep.
Like when he was there, is to like
Scare the crap out of him. Yeah.
And so if he hadn't have done that in the first place, maybe she would have stayed. But again,
Right.
I think you're right. I think it's fated. It's supposed to happen that way. And again, that would be a very boring book if it ended there.
Yeah, I think Feyre going under the mountain is the destination, no matter what the
What
journey
happens,
looks like,
yeah.
right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
the end result is always going to be the same.
Because I mean, I think knowing how evil Amarantha is, if the curse had been broken, she still would have attacked.
right.
She
oh, yeah.
was building
and
an
she,
army.
And she
She
does.
did, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She has sympathizers, not sympathists. She has some sympathists. She has Y'all, she has What am I saying?
Sympathizers.
Sympathizers. It sounds weird, doesn't it? Okay.
Because you've said it 5 other ways.
You've said it too many times.
She has people that want to be a part of her movement. How's that?
Yeah, that's true.
And so she does, it wouldn't have mattered if Feyre had broken the curse or not. The same thing probably would have happened.
Yeah. It was in the stars.
It was in the
fate.
stars. So how sad is the whole story about Clythia?
Oh, I know.
I actually wanted to talk about that a little bit because, so the basic version, I mean, it's a long story, but Amarantha's sister, Clythia.
Okay, which sounds like a venereal disease.
know,
Let's
it
just get
does,
that out of the way.
And isn't it so interesting that in the 5th book, there's what's the chick in the library's name? Clotho?
Clotho.
Like I don't know.
Clotho is one of the fates.
Right. And
Yeah.
so like I want to know what that tie is because I think that's too close to
Yeah.
not be something.
I didn't look that up, but so Amarantha and Clythia are sisters, and they're both generals for Hybern, right? In the war 500 years ago, the Fae versus human war, right? So Spring Court under Tamlin's father sided with Hybern against the humans. There was a human, Jurian, who basically like seduced Clythia and slept with her, pretended to be in love with her to get information
And
from
she fell
her.
in love with him.
And she
He did
fell in
all
love
of the
with
things that the humans say the Fae are going to do to them.
Right. Well, and he's doing the same thing that Rhysand is having to do with
Right.
Amarantha
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
Just for a different reason, a different purpose. So he basically used Clythia for information, and then Amarantha is like, "Why are you slumming it with this human? This is beneath you. You can't trust humans." And Clythia's like, "You don't understand. I love him." And then Jurian,
Mom, I love him.
And Jurian ends up killing Clythia. So then that starts an epic, battle basically between Jurian and Amarantha.
Well, and here's the interesting thing I thought about that too, is that Amarantha wanted to like torture and kill Jurian.
100%.
And she refrained from it because she didn't want to like hurt her sister. So I thought it was very interesting that in that moment, Amarantha is capable of some sort of love and or restraint.
Yeah, that's
which we
true.
do not see ever again.
Well, it even
Well-
says in here, she butchered her own slaves rather than free them. The High Lords believed when she told them that the death of her sister had changed her.
And there's a whole lot of butchering going on, by the way. Like, she uses that word. Like, when you think about that,
Yeah.
it's not just murdering. Like, that's
Right.
really, really.
What you were
sick
just
and
saying
twisted.
about like restraint, though, I think we are seeing restraint right now because in this point in the story, because she wants Tamlin.
So I don't think that's restraint. I think it's a form of torture.
Oh, you
And
think
kind
so?
of the same thing she's doing to Jurian, because Jurian
Yeah, I guess I see what you're saying.
quote unquote alive in that
Yeah.
ring.
Yes.
Killing him would have been a mercy.
Yeah.
Having him watch everything she does for the next 549 years is
Yeah.
torture.
That's
So
true.
her putting the curse on Tamlin was her going, I'm going to get you no matter what.
Yeah.
Here's 49 years to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
To figure out this
Right.
loophole that
and
I've given you.
to
yeah.
live with the pit of dread in your stomach for 49 years.
That's true. That's a good point.
Well, and I still think she doesn't want to control him. She wants him
To
because
choose her.
Yes.
Yes. Well, that actually brings me to one of the main thing that I thought was really curious. So when Alice is explaining this Clythia Amarantha situation to Feyre, she says that Clythia loved Jurian with an unrelenting madness. And I thought, is that potentially the way that Amarantha feels about Tamlin?
And was that a mating bond that didn't snap for Jurian?
Maybe.
Ooh,
Maybe.
yeah.
I don't know. But I just thought that was really interesting because it seems unrelenting madness, I think, describes Amarantha pretty
Oh, yeah.
aptly. Right?
Absolutely.
And I was, we've talked before about the theory that maybe Amarantha was Tamlin's mate, and that could explain the kind of similarities between some of their behaviors and maybe why he is so horrible after Amarantha dies at his own hand, right? But I just thought that was a really interesting description. Like, she loved him with unrelenting madness, because it seems to me that that's what Amarantha is doing with Tamlin.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
it's crazy. It is relentless. And she definitely feels something for him, right? Because she wants him. So even at a very base level, it's desire, even if it's not anything else.
Well, I actually wrote that down too. I'm trying to look for
While
it.
you're looking, I want to say too that by this point in the story that Alice is telling Feyre about Amarantha, Amarantha is essentially trying to do these little good deeds to unite people while she's building her own army, right? So, like, she is not used to being told no. And I feel like Tamlin was one of the only people that ever told her no during this time,
Right.
and she just lost
Threw a
her
hissy
shit.
fit
Yeah.
about it. I did mark on here that as I was reading, it said that Amarantha desired and lusted. Those are the two words that they use to kind of describe it. It never said she loved him. It never said
Oh,
like
yeah,
she
she doesn't
cared for him,
love
because
him.
she's not. I mean, like I said, the only time I've ever seen her like capable of even a hint of love is with her sister.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting because I think we had talked about that earlier about like, did she really love Tamlin? Like, what is it? Like, what does she really feel for him? But I mean, it's desire and lust. So it's purely passion and physical in my mind.
And Alice says too that, you know, when she's trying to get with Tamlin, she's blackmailing him or trying to blackmail him into being her consort.
Yes.
Right? Like not partner or maid
Yes.
or spouse or whatever, but like consort to me always has the connotation of just like a sexual relationship.
Yeah.
Which I know it's not always used like that, but
We
in my
actually
head
talked
it does.
about that on the podcast, remember? Because we talked about how Rowan is Aelin's consort and how I feel like that sounds like a concubine.
It does,
Yeah.
And technically it's not, but in our heads it kind of is, right?
Yeah, you explained it to me really well, and I already forgot, and we don't have to get into it again, but I was like, yeah, that makes sense, and now I'm like, I don't get it.
I will say too, this is just kind of a random thing, but I realized Amarantha, the name, you know, her name is very similar to the word Maranatha, which is like a Greek word from the Bible that means like come Lord or like come Messiah or whatever. And I just thought that was really interesting because it's the exact same letters. You just move one of the A's to the front of the word. And I wondered if Sarah J. Maas did that purposefully at all, because Amarantha is like the inverse of that idea, right? Like of a savior, like wanting to invite
Antichrist.
Yes. Like I just thought that was really interesting because I'm like, that can't be a coincidence that it's the exact same letters. You just move one of them.
When Lucian was sent to Amarantha as Tamlin's emissary to try to, you know, create a peaceful resolution.
Poor Lucian.
Oh my gosh, though. But I wrote a heart next to this and I never caught it. It says she refused and Lucian told her to go back to the shithole she'd crawled out of. And I'm like, that's why I love Lucian.
I know.
Right? And it says she took his eye as punishment. And the High Lord vomited when he saw his friend. Like, I can't imagine what, because it wasn't like she took it out nicely.
No, well, he's got that horrible scar.
Right. And it says, and you know, it's interesting that this is pointed out. She carved it out with her own fingernail and then scarred his face. So it makes it sound to me like she took the eye out and then continued to fuck him up. Yeah. Like this isn't going to be just you using your eye. You're going to be scarred the rest of your life because your boy won't go down on me.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And I had kind of forgotten some of the specifics too of Tamlin's rejection of her. Like, he doesn't just reject her, he insults her and her sister's memories, which I'm like, well, yeah, that's why she was so pissed and cursed him, right? Like, he says he refused to be her consort and said he would rather have a human for a lover, and said even your own sister would rather have a human or rather be with a human
I
than
wrote that
spend
down
time
too,
with you.
which is why she cursed him.
Exactly.
It had to be a human that hated Faye, and it had to be one of, and I didn't realize that it did have to be one of his men. It couldn't be just anybody.
A random Faye. It had to be one of his men.
Well, and because we talk about how even after the glamour comes off of Feyre in the Spring Court and she can see everyone, there's not just people, like it's not hundreds and hundreds of people. And it talks about for 200 years, he sent someone out every day. 2 years.
I was going to say, definitely not 200.
2 years, he sent someone out every day. So he sent, you know, over 700 people out to get, you know, and most of them didn't come back.
To die. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he had, you know, all of these fighters essentially in his army that he was trying. And that's a pretty good political move on Amarantha's part for him to
get rid of your warriors.
Right. Get rid of the warriors so that your court is weakened, because he was down to practically no one by the time Andros went out. And it talks about how he was like, just go one more time. Let's just see what happens. Who knows?
Well, and that, you know, that, and not just rejecting her, but insulting her and like pushing her over the edge for the curse or whatever. That's why he feels so much guilt and so much shame, because he's like, if I hadn't been such a dick, maybe this wouldn't have happened, you know, which the way
we all feel
Amarantha
like that
is,
about
Who
mistakes.
knows?
Right.
If it wasn't that, it was going to be something
exactly.
else.
Well,
right.
So we have talked a little bit about this in previous episodes, but we know that she essentially tricks all of the High Lords to coming under the mountain, gives them a potion, which our drink tonight it's called Rumtastic Love Potion. It's actually really good. But, she got all of these people to believe in her enough to trust to come under a mountain, drink her drinks and eat her food, thinking that she wouldn't do anything because she had been like this voice of reason. We're going to bring people together, and Hybern wants to work with you. And I'm so sorry about what I did to Lucian, and please come here and let's have this ball in my honor. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how, we've seen in our own current history, I'm saying current in the last 100 years, of these evil leaders that come into and stay into power. And I found it really interesting that Amanrantha did these horrific acts of war, right? And she comes back and does a couple of good things, and people are like, okay, cool, you're fine, it's no big deal, right? And so I wanted to look a little bit into how do we get these people into power, and how do they stay in power? So I found this really interesting article on Psychology Today about this, and they had 4 points that I found really interesting. And then I know it's a little cliche, but I'm going to compare them to Hitler because I think Hitler's someone that everyone knows, and I think everyone will understand that reference. So in Psychology Today, it says people want their leaders to be strong. And because of that, we often confuse arrogance and narcissism for strength, which is 100% true.
Ain't that the truth?
Number 2, the human mind creates mental shortcuts because they're needed to give our brains a break from analyzing things so much. So mental shortcuts make us believe that a bad leader isn't really that bad, right? Mental shortcuts tend to make people not question a leader's point of view or behaviors because leaders can easily gaslight people. It wasn't that big of a deal. Everybody does it. Or I had a moment of weakness. I'm sorry I tore that guy's eye out. I was just mad, right?
That's how guys talk.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And the human mind trusts these mental shortcuts because we want people in leadership that are similar to us because the human mind ultimately wants to conform. So if you have someone in leadership that believes the same things as you, no matter what their deeds are, you're probably going to follow them, unfortunately.
Which is why when leaders tell you things and you take them at face value.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And another mental shortcut is that it makes us believe that the alternative to current leadership could actually be worse. Which is true because people always say it could be worse.
And it could be, but that doesn't make it okay right now.
Exactly. So number 3 in this article says that good leadership is often equated with effectiveness. So value is placed on results and not what it takes to get to those results. So the amount of bad deeds that you have to do and people saying it is what it is that's not valued. The value is placed on did you get shit done? Which
that's the whole end. The end justifies the means.
Exactly. So number 4 is that humans like to bask in a leader's power by association. So if you voted for a leader, stood behind a leader that is doing really great things, there's this euphoria of oh my gosh, well I chose them. They're so great. But then if they do something bad, they're well, it can't be that bad because you associate with that person, right? So this is kind of where Hitler comes in. And I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of parallels between Hitler and Amanrantha, which I found really, really interesting in terms of Sarah J. Maas's research. So the first thing that Hitler did, because, he was not a well-liked man before the regime. He was an artist. He got rejected from art school. He had already been in prison. He was known as someone that was cold and ineffectual and hard to be around. So the first thing that they did is they created propaganda posters that showed Hitler surrounded by women and children and strong men in leadership as his followers. And so the whole basking in leadership by association, right? Well, I'm a mom with young kids and they don't mind being around him, right? And it's kind of the same thing with Amanrantha, right? Well, I'm with all of these strong people that do trust me and everything's going to be okay. And I'm just here on behalf of Hybern. Number 2 is Hitler said that his main goal was to unify a party, which is exactly what Amanrantha says she's doing. Yeah. She wants to unify Hybern with Prythian. And this goes back to that effective leadership, no matter the cost. Number 3, mental shortcuts made people vote strictly by party line and not question Hitler's motives or actions. Number 4, Hitler was charismatic. And, you know, not in it, there's a lot of articles that talk about like not like kind of in your interpersonal skills, but once he got up on stage and he had that propaganda to back him up, he could talk in front of people.
Well, he probably just said all the right things. He said the things they wanted to hear.
Exactly. So Hitler also hired disenfranchised and unemployed veterans to his army. So again, effective leadership, no matter the steps to get to the result, right? So Amarantha started taking these people that were kind of seeing the scum of the fairy world and put them in her army. So they feel loyal to her. She's the only one that's ever helped them. They were like living in squalor, and
She
now
gives
they're
them
in
a
this
purpose.
army. Yeah. And then the last thing, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but the last thing was going into the whole like unity thing, and like, you know, they did some good things. So Hitler actually had a super ambitious public works program that helped restore prosperity in post-war Germany. So he's doing these things with workers, right? And getting, you know, wealth restored in Germany. And so people are like, well, he can't be a bad guy.
Well, and Amarantha did that with trade.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he used chaos and uncertainty as a tool to unify the Nazi party, which is essentially what Amarantha does as well. She uses all that chaos post-war to go, no, we've changed. We're doing better. And like, we just want to work with you and everything's going to be fine. And here, come join my army and look at how nice I am. And I will punish people, but I'm really sorry every time I do it. And this just really stuck with me because, I mean, we've seen even within our lifetimes people in power where we're like, what the fuck is happening right now? Right? But we've also talked about, you know, how you have your own unconscious bias, right? There's a lot in these books that we let Rhysand get away with that we wouldn't let Tamlin get away with.
100%.
Right? Because Rhysand's kind of our party.
Right.
Or that
You know?
we let Feyre get away with that we don't let Nesta get away
Or
with.
that
Right.
we'll bend over backwards to justify.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, it was bad, but let's talk about his motivation and here's where he was coming from. And
Because
I do it too.
You can,
Hello,
as you're as Alice is telling the story, it's really interesting the manipulation and the things that she does to get people to trust her just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I
Just
think
enough.
right, ultimately we want to see the good in people, and we have to, I think, for our own mental health, we have to go like, well, they would never do that.
Right.
They would never put us under a mountain and torture us for 50 years. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way anyone would do that. And I've said a million times, the reason I think that the Hunger Games got so popular is because it's not that far off.
It's really
Right.
not. Same thing with
And that's
Handmaid's
terrifying.
Tale, the
Yeah,
TV show,
yeah.
right?
And
Like,
I've had people roll their eyes at me when I've said that Handmaid's Tale thing. I'm like,
It's
we're
not.
one government decision away.
I mean,
Oh,
we
yeah.
really are.
Right. And, you know, it's really, really scary because we voted these people into power. I mean, I didn't.
I did
but
not.
Not we. Not the
three of us did not.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that I have, you know, everyone votes poorly sometimes. But I think watching these people come into power, it's never something where it's like they were bad and then suddenly like, oh, they're popular. Like, there is a slow burn that
Yeah.
happens that they know what they're doing.
Well,
right?
and it's interesting because it makes me think of in book 2 when Rhysand is talking to his inner circle about Hybern and what Hybern is planning. Because Amarantha was working for Hybern and then
Right.
went off on her own
Yeah,
to do
she
all
went
this
rogue.
Prythian crap, right?
Yeah.
And Hybern is doing all those same things that you were just talking about, right? And
Right.
Rhysand is basically like, Hybern has purposefully kept his people kind of in the Dark Ages so that they'll get mad about the outcome of that first war,
Right.
and be
Right.
like, we need to get back to the good old days. We're being oppressed and we're getting the short end
We've
of the
lost
stick,
all of
and
our slaves. Like, now we
Yes.
have to do all of these things on our
let's
own.
go back to the way that it was.
Right.
And like, it's that same
Let's-
kind of like
Let's
purposeful.
make our country great again.
Exactly, right? Like that purposeful manipulation
Right.
to be able to do the things that he wants to do. Like
Right.
Hybern and Amarantha are the same because they have the same goal ultimately.
Right.
That's just interesting.
Well,
And I
their-
wanna-
their goal is their own personal benefit.
Right.
Yeah,
and I
power
want to
and
point
status.
out for anyone that is just nonchalantly listening in their car and just did like the record screech when Mindy said that phrase, we don't condone that phrase and we don't endorse that phrase. Just putting that out there.
True.
In case that made you stop and go, wait what did they
In case
say?
you missed the sarcasm.
I was going to say, in case you thought that I was siding with Hybern, which I am not.
Right, yeah.
Well, and when you were saying a couple minutes ago about like everybody trusted Amarantha to go under the mountain, I just want to point out there were 2 High Lords for sure that didn't.
Rhysand
and Tamlin.
Okay.
And Rhysand tells Feyre in book 2, he basically says, I knew not to trust her because I could see that Tamlin didn't trust her.
I don't think anyone thought it would be as bad as it was.
Oh, I'm sure they didn't.
Like, we're going to go down here and she's going to, like, start some shit. But...
Right. But he was like, I saw that Tamlin was still very cautious and very wary. And he would know her better than any of us would because he spent time around her, like, since he was a kid. He knew Amarantha, right?
And I had forgotten that, too. And I had also forgotten that she is essentially, at this point, called the Queen of Prythian. And it talks about how there is no queen. There's like essentially governors, right? Is what it boils down to. And I had forgotten that she's so powerful. Like her word is stone. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that you can do. And I mean, all it would take was these 7 High Lords being like, fuck you. No, they still had enough power.
But there were
But she
3.
scared them enough.
Well, she killed them.
That's
too.
right.
I was going to say there were
3
3 that rebelled.
It
It was
was
day, winter,
and summer.
Yeah.
Right.
And then she killed their High Lord.
Which is why it's such a big deal in book 2 when Rhys and Feyre and Amren go to the summer court and everybody's so like nervous about Tarquin having these visitors because he became High Lord under the mountain.
Right.
And like, never had to deal with being a High Lord, right? Because he was
no diplomacy or anything
right,
like
he
that,
was under the mountain.
Here's a question. So was everybody under the mountain, like in these courts? Like,
I don't think so.
I continue to be confused by that
do
too,
too.
Well,
because how was there never any type of I mean, and I think it goes back to fear. She used fear as a tool.
It goes back to fear. Well, okay, so I think it's a multi-layered like answer to that question. So first of all, when Feyre and Rhysand and Amren go to Summer Court in book 2, Tarquin tells Feyre that when everything happened under the mountain, he got like a message. I'm assuming like a mind message like Rhysand can do from somebody that was like, hide all the stuff. Like, it's hitting the fan, hide all the stuff. Which tells me that if his High Lord was under the mountain, he wasn't. If he was being given a message to hide all the stuff in the summer court.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that, at least in that situation, I think he was not under the mountain until the High Lord of Summer got killed and he like raised up as the new High Lord. And then I think he was probably like summoned or forced to go down under the mountain.
Because I mean, she could literally just kill your entire
Well,
court.
but then Alice says that Winter Court was part of that uprising and she killed the High Lord of Winter Court. But then in book 3, when they go to the High Lord meeting and we meet Callias, the new High Lord of Winter Court, he is talking about his relationship with his wife in a way that made me understand it to be like, I've been the High Lord this whole time. And I didn't get to tell her how I felt because I was under the mountain and like had to stay there all of a sudden, which maybe he went with his High Lord at first, but like that confuses me because it seems very clear to me Tarquin was not under the mountain originally, but that maybe Callias, whatever that he was. I don't know. I don't understand all of it.
And this is why I'm still confused too, because Alice takes her nephews and flees to the Spring Court, which in my mind is like the literal only place left to go.
But I think for her, the reason she did that is because then she didn't belong to a court, right? So she didn't have to report anywhere.
No, I don't think it was so she wouldn't belong to a court. It was because Amarantha killed her sister and her brother-in-law, and Spring Court was the loophole. That was the only chance.
Okay.
And so she wanted to do anything she could to help.
And we never meet these nephews, right? Ever?
I don't think we do. I think that they were and we talked about this at that time, but I think they were the, giggles and footsteps that Feyre heard behind her, like in the garden at the Spring
spooky
Court.
specters.
Yes, the spooky.
Freak the shit out of me.
I think those were the nephews, but other than that, we just hear of them. I don't think we ever meet them.
But I guess in my mind, I thought, well, everywhere else was, if they weren't necessarily under the mountain, they were controlled by her for sure.
100%.
And that's why she fled to the Spring Court, because it was the only one that was left open, I guess, to do what they wanted to do, but not necessarily.
Well, we find out in book 2 and in book 3 also, but definitely in the Summer Court, they talk about Amarantha, attacked the cities in the different courts and, destroyed homes and destroyed buildings. Like, she definitely used fear and, military attack.
Well, it goes back to that whole feeding into the chaos, because if you take the governor out of the city and all of the leadership and the strongest people with the most powers, then people are going like, well, who makes decisions?
Yeah,
and
what are we supposed to do?
Who does trade agreements? Who ensures that there's law enforcement?
Right.
Like who? So what she's doing is she's breaking down the courts by taking out the leadership, so they are too scared to fend for themselves because no one has ever even had the capability or thought to rise into power because of the way the hierarchy is.
Well, and also on top of that, feeding into the chaos, she has taken the majority of the power from all the High Lords, and essentially by doing that has given more power to the lesser fae that we've talked about that are like attacking the Spring Court lands. So not only do you have people without their leadership with less magic, but you also have all these like frustrated what's the word?
She's uniting
disgruntled,
right?
Is what I'm trying to
She's
think of.
uniting the disgruntled people so that they
Exactly.
will band with her,
right? And they are her enforcers,
Right.
basically, right? Like they are her secret police that'll like spy on you and go back and tell her,
which is what a manipulative leader does.
Exactly.
They find the disenfranchised and be like, no, I will take, here's more power, go
Right.
use it. Doesn't
Right.
it feel great? I'm sure.
Well, and then I just looked at my notes and realized that I might have answered a little bit of my own question. Apparently, she bound everyone to their own courts, so they couldn't move between their courts. And this is where I just feel like I didn't realize the Children of the Blessed came in so much.
I didn't either.
But that they used the Children of the Blessed as messengers between courts because they weren't bound to a court because they were human. So they would lure them in and use them, and then of course Amarantha would butcher them,
find
'cause
out
that's
and kill them.
what
Yeah.
she likes to
And I will say, reading the book like we do this, where we're like taking notes and doing all that. And I know people always annotate their books, but y'all, I can't annotate all of my books because I like to loan them out. I really do. I love like sharing my books with other people, and even like I gave you the Second Crescent City to read, and you're like, I know what the orange tab means. Spoiler alert, it's sex. But like I was like, that's the only one you'll be able to figure out.
Right.
But I don't even like having it annotated in that way because you know something is important because I tabbed it.
Right.
And so I really want to be able to write my books, but I can't buy 2 copies of every book, you guys.
Yeah. It gets really expensive.
It does.
And there's not enough room.
There's not. There's definitely not.
No, I have little symbols too. Like I have like a broken heart symbol that I write and a lot of like things that Nesta says or like stuff that I'm like, that's Rhysand. He loves you. Like those kinds of things. But I was going to say one more thing about Amarantha. I think I've said this before in a much earlier episode, but Amarantha stole the power from the High Lords, which I had never really connected with Feyre having a kernel of all their powers because they gave her a kernel of their power. And so then she has a little bit of it. And I'd never fully understood why some of the High Lords react so strongly against that and like so negatively to it. And then this reading, I'm realizing like that's just too similar to what Amarantha did. Yeah. And so like that's the only other experience that they would have to compare, right? And that was so traumatic and devastating for all of them. Like I understand why I get why they're so like, well, they might just kill you if they find out that you took their power, that helped kind of fill in some blanks for me. But
yeah, interesting couple of chapters for sure.
I know.
Yeah. I love everything that Alice revealed, and I love that it was Alice that revealed it. I think that was I don't know. I just love her as a character, and I do love how she just laid into Feyre like, you fucking idiot.
Right.
Like,
I think that's not really fair to Feyre that she feels that way, but I think it heightens the emotional reaction that Feyre has, and then therefore us as the reader, right?
Yeah.
Like, you were this close, you idiot. Like, why? How could you not figure this out, right? And there's some other stuff that happens under the mountain that I'm like, how could you not figure that out, Feyre? But we'll get there in just a few chapters.
Stress really rewires your brain.
Yeah.
Maybe that is something I'll talk about.
Yeah, that's true. How trauma affects your ability to use your brain.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to go into our nerdiest things of the week?
Absolutely. What's yours, Whit?
My nerdiest thing is kind of twofold. So one is that I've requested A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is kind of like the novella between the third and fourth, technically, ACOTAR books, which a lot of people don't enjoy that, and I really, really love it.
I really didn't enjoy that book.
I love it, and it's been a long time.
The only reason I didn't like it is because it could have been a prologue to the next book. It was too long.
Oh, see, I think it's a fun,
but
short
a lot of
little
really
read.
good fan art has come out of that book.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's almost winter solstice. It's almost Christmas. Like, that would be fun to read the week before. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is I've been wearing my Valaris t-shirt that I got for Mindy and my Grammar Police sweatshirt that I got from Deb. Basically exclusively since you guys gave them to me last week. But I've gotten, I usually wear the sweatshirt over the t-shirt. So I've gotten more compliments on the sweatshirt just because I'm covering up the t-shirt.
Well, it's fucking cold right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. I have my Nesta candle. I said to Mindy, I hope it smells like bitch.
And I said, no, that's the I am candle.
Yeah. But I'm really excited about that. So thank you guys for those gifts.
You're welcome.
I've been very much enjoying them.
For me, so I discovered a new series. I got it off of Kindle Unlimited, and it's the Pucked series, which you all know I love.
I almost recommended
hockey.
this to you.
I know. So you all know I love ice hockey.
Pucked.
Pucked.
Oh,
Yes.
I thought you said punked, and I was like Ashton Kutcher show? Like, what?
No,
That would be
I'm with you.
super nerdy.
fucked with a P.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
So I finished Kingdom of Ash. So I finished the whole Throne of Glass series this week, and I needed something a little less intense,
A little lighter?
Yeah. And so it's definitely not like the best writing ever. It's definitely fluff, but holy crap, it was like, by the way, this is a series by Helena Hunting. There's several in there. It's all based on hockey players. It's so not like they totally go on and win the Stanley Cup, which is not even like, it's not realistic at all, which wasn't what I was wanting anyways. But
I don't want realism for
I know,
any
right?
of my books.
And but I'm telling you, it was hot. And I will tell you that
What was the spice level?
I mean, it's like half the book is fucking. I mean, it just
Is it like Court of Silver Flames?
more.
Oh.
Like it just like it's definitely like I would say like a true romance book.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely more about the sex scenes than it is about any kind of world building or any kind of story or anything. It's
Well,
not
something was building it. Was
Yeah, exactly. But it's funny. It was funny and it was snarky and like the characters are funny and I like her voice. But it also was like really arousing, and I'm just gonna say that my husband was not unsatisfied.
Way to go.
I don't know what I thought you were going to say, but that's not it.
So yeah, so he's totally on board with me reading some more of those.
I actually have another series for ice hockey that I'll send you.
Oh, I would
that
love
I've,
to know.
I've seen a lot going around.
It's
So
just such a random like niche. There's a lot of ice hockey.
I mean,
A
series
lot of ice
out
hockey
there.
porn going on.
I mean, someone's going to read it. Apparently,
Mindy's gonna read it.
I will read the shit out of that.
There's a whole sports subgenre romance books. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a whole thing.
I can't do like football or anything like that, but ice hockey I can totally get behind.
For some reason, I see and this is I always have to say no offense, but I can't see a football player being as smart as a hockey player. Be like, so you want to do it?
You've got some internalized bias there.
I do. So I have a couple of things. Number one being that Whitney had told me to read The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. Is that right, Whit?
Yeah, yes.
And you're literally at like 70% through the book, and I'm going like, okay, I've got it figured out. And I even told Whitney when I saw her the other night, I was like, I've got it figured out. This person did this. This person did this. And it's like 2 a.m. and I all of a sudden go, what the fuck is happening? What the fuck is happening? So then I had to tell my husband to read it, and I've told like every single person I've seen since then to read this book.
I told you.
Okay, so I will say it would have gotten 5 stars from me, but it literally at that 70% mark changed genres. And I think that's why some people give it a low rating.
Yeah, I agree.
And I
loved that.
I loved it
jarring,
too, but I was like, and I told Whitney I'd taken a CBD gummy, and I was like, I need to reread this tomorrow. Because it really kicked in. Number 2, and this episode will air after this happens, but I planned with Mindy our winter solstice dinner that we're going to have with our bookish friends.
Yay.
It'll be next week. So if you're listening to this episode, you can go on Instagram and see our pictures from that. But I'm really, really excited about that. We're going to get dressed up and have a girls' night and have a fancy
I'm excited
dinner.
about
And
it too.
I think it's going to be really, really great.
Yeah,
So
it'll be fun.
And then our cocktail is a rum-tastic love potion because,
Which I've completely downed.
I mean,
it's good.
Yeah,
it's
it's really good. And I did that because Amarantha, gave everyone the potion that took their powers, and I didn't want to give you guys an evil potion. I wanted to give you a love
We
potion.
appreciate that.
I want to make you feel better about reading at 2 a.m. So I started this book last night, and I was still up at 5 a.m. reading it.
Well, I'm doing sleep therapy, so I'm supposed to go to sleep when I'm tired. And when you see this drastic change in this book, I was like, well, fuck, I'm not going to sleep now.
Yeah.
I'm not tired anymore.
I can't
I'm
sleep
jacked
on that.
up.
I need to know if this is actually happening, or because I thought at first this change in scenery, I'm like, is she dreaming?
Yeah.
And she's an alcoholic in the book, so I'm like, is she right? What's happening?
Oh, is she an unreliable narrator?
She is an unreliable narrator.
I need to read this
and
book.
It was very much like Girl on the Train, right? I thought it was going to be something like that, and you really need to read
All right,
it.
I gotta read that.
I mean,
don't tell me anything else.
I will be honest. I don't read very many mysteries and thrillers because I always figure them out. And
I'm
so
the same way.
when Whitney told me to read it, Whitney gets stuff figured out faster than I do. And that's why I was like, why did she recommend this shit to me? God.
Just keep reading.
Just keep reading. I should have just started texting you being like, so what about this person? What is this person going to do? When is this person coming back?
Send me all the questions I send you guys.
But then I'm too frantically reading, and it stresses me out to stop and type questions because then I'm like, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I'll stay up till 5 a.m. and read if I do that. So, yeah.
That's fun. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And that you're
thanks for the
telling
rec.
everybody else to read it.
I know. I'm so out of control telling people about it too.
That's funny. Well, that is it for this episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about chapters 33, 34, and 35. And it'll be wonderful because Rhysand will be back under the mountain.
Yay! Can't wait.
So we'll see you then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
For exclusive content and to keep up with all things nerdy, follow us on Instagram at Our Nerdiest Thing. We post book reviews, what to read next, and our cocktail recipes. Have something nerdy that you'd like to share? Email us at ournerdiestthing@gmail.com. This podcast is edited and produced by The Story Guides. Thanks for listening.